vero e proprio.
You can't open the door to the netherworld by force, or you'll be sorry when they come. When I was 15, I dreamed of learning to play the guitar. Every day I watched lessons on YouTube and dreamed of playing with Linkin Park. My mom was a wonderful woman with a hard fate. Despite all the hardships, she was always cheerful, kind, and caring. She wanted only one thing: my happiness. And one day she said, "Let's go buy a guitar." I was happy and grateful to her. At that time, there weren't many stores that specialized in musical instruments, but we managed to find one. It was an old store in the basement. The electricity in it sometimes went out and the lamp flickered, creating an eerie atmosphere. The door was closed, but there was a light on inside, so I knocked on the door, but no one answered. After waiting for a while, we knocked again, but there was no answer. My desire to buy a guitar was so strong that I overcame my shyness and asked loudly, "Excuse me, is anyone here? We'd like to buy a guitar." But even the second time, we were met with silence. I started to get frustrated and tugged my mom's sleeve, but then I heard a creak and a rustle of footsteps. The door opened with a loud screech, and an old man looked up at us from the darkness. He was the typical rock music fan, tattoos and piercings.
"Sorry, I was listening to music and didn't hear you,"
he said in a husky voice, inviting us inside. My mom and I were about to leave, feeling a growing unease. But the man looked sharply into Mom's eyes and said something that made our blood run cold.
"You must be tired. It takes a long time to recover after surgery. Come in, sit down."
We were numb because Mom had really had surgery a month ago. As if under hypnosis, we stepped inside. Honestly, I forgot why we were there. Despite all the guitars surrounding us, we kept our eyes on this man. We'd only heard of such a thing from acquaintances or on TV. We were excited and a little scared as we asked him questions. Who he was, how he knew, and what else he could tell us. Each time his answers made our eyes widen more and more with fear. He knew about our homeland and the war there. Mom's back pain was really getting to her, and no amount of medication was helping. The man told her to stand up, and slowly ran his hand over her sore spot. 5 minutes later, her pain was greatly reduced. He said his abilities had been with him since birth. He's a healer, can see hidden things, and reads people's energy. He told us our energy is very positive. The friendly smile flashed across his face again. I suddenly felt like I wanted to be special like him, to feel unique for once in my life. I asked him directly, could I be like him? He looked me in the eye for a long time before saying slowly and with a cold desperation,
"No, you can't. You don't have the right skills for it. Unlike your mother, she could do it."
We both looked at Mom. Mom was as surprised as I was, exclaiming, "Me? Are you sure? I've never..." Then she suddenly stopped talking and told us. She told me that when she was young, she used to read cards and everything came true. Those who wronged her found their misfortune, though she never wished it. She stopped doing it after my older sister was born. He explained that such abilities are passed down through the generations, from mother to eldest daughter. I felt a bit bitter that I had been excluded from this mystical circle, especially since my mother was, in fact, a witch, and I never knew it. He tried to convince me that he wanted to become stronger one day, and he once asked the strongest witch in town for help, but she refused, warning him that he couldn't take much more. She told him to stay at his level and that he didn't understand who he wanted to open the door to. She said that it wasn't for him, even as a healer.
But I, the fool, didn't listen to her. I didn't understand then and took offense. I only learned the lesson of my life later.
His eyes seemed to pierce my soul, and a deep exhale made frost run down my skin. He reached for the cooled tea, took a long sip, and continued.
I'm afraid that despite what I say, you won't give up and decide to explore this. You're young and curious. You feel left out and will want to prove your worth. But please listen to the story about my cousin's husband.
I was torn between resentment and a longing for secret knowledge. How could I be so easily shown the intriguing and immediately have it taken away, leaving me a spectator in this magical world? He started by saying,
My brother-in-law was a wonderful man, kind and funny. One day he went to Bali and came back as a different person. There he was given a ritual, met the shamans, and wished to become part of their world. Who wouldn't want to leave the dull everyday life for the wonderful and mysterious, right?
The old man smiled sadly.
Day after day, he got more and more into meditation, spending hours in stillness, trying to achieve nirvana. I tried to warn him, to tell him what a witch friend had said. This is not for you. Don't open that door. But he wouldn't listen. Then everything changed. He changed. My cousin and his mother stopped recognizing him. His way of speaking changed. His tastes in food and clothes became strange. He used to not like bitter coffee because it hurt his stomach every time. But then he drank it every morning, starting with it while reading the paper. He almost stopped talking to his wife and often looked out the window. At night, he hardly slept at all, leaving the house and returning at dawn. He was indifferent to his world, so he sat alone in his room for hours. Their cat, who had once loved him, now hissed and hid every time he approached, and he looked at Cat with a crazy smile. My cousin called me in a panic.
I can't live with him anymore. He's not the man I knew. I'm scared to stay under the same roof with him. His mom doesn't recognize him either. He's become withdrawn and frightening. What should we do? The old man stopped suddenly, lit a cigarette, and asked a rhetorical question.
Do you know what happens when someone realizes nirvana? His soul separates from his body. It's a journey into a world that shouldn't have been there. It sounds great, but there's one problem. How do you get back? Can the soul find its way back to the body?
He took a deep drag on his cigarette. He didn't wait for my answer and just kept going.
All I could suggest to my sister was to ask him, "Who are you?" That evening, my cousin and her mother-in-law were in the kitchen cooking dinner. Her husband was sitting at the table, quietly reading the newspaper. They looked over at each other and, nervously chopping vegetables, decided to ask. My sister asked him,
Who are you?
Without turning around. The room was filled with an oppressive silence. She got even more nervous and, taking a deep breath, she wanted to ask the question again. But then he slowly put down the newspaper and said,
Which one of us is it? There are quite a few of us.
He spoke in several voices and laughed ominously. That was the last day my cousin saw her husband alive. She started going to church and became a nun.
The old man took a deep drag on his cigarette, eyes full of grim determination, and explained.
When you open a door to a world that shouldn't be yours, you let more in than just yourself. And those who come through that door aren't always alone. They don't leave on their own, and they wait to take what they've been after for a long time. A new home, a new life in the body of a man.
I felt like my inner world was crumbling, and I started to understand that this old man was speaking for a reason. The whole eerie atmosphere, his pauses, and his story all became very real, and it made me feel scared. Then he said,
Where's my brother-in-law's soul now? No one will ever know.
My mom and I left after the story as quickly as possible. I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. But did I know that even talking about them meant calling and inviting them? And my first meeting with them was yet to come. No,